Doug Lapp, your town administrator, and I'm here today with our Veterans Service Officer, also known as a Veterans Agent, Tim White. Tim, thanks so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug, and thank WRPS for having me today. So I really look forward to talking about what the Veteran Agent position does and how we're connected here in the town of Rockland.
Excellent, excellent. So I think the first question I have is if you could just talk a little bit about your background and sort of how you came to this position and sort of introduce yourself to the community.
Sure. So my name's Tim White, Timothy White, and I am, originally I was in the United States Coast Guard for over 20 years, active duty, transferred really, most of the U.S., out of continental U.S., Hawaii, and then some parts of the world, between the Caribbean and Norway, South Korea, so some different areas for short stints of time. I retired as a Command Master Chief. I was E9. My last unit happened to be in Boston. I originally grew up in Worcester when I joined the Coast Guard. All my family members are prior services. They're in all services throughout all wars for many, many years. So I did have an uncle in the Coast Guard in 1950s, and I guess I joined, knowing that his rich experience. So I was in operations. So I was on the Coast Guard cutter side, not the air side. And, when you're in the Coast Guard, you just kind of meander a path and do a million different things. It's such a small service. So I was involved with oil spills, hazardous chemical releases for a good portion of my career. Then after 9/11, security, which is knowing the hazardous material regulations and the transfer on container ships, because after 9/11 we were worried about dirty bombs coming to U.S. ports. So we had to build, strategies to how are we going to, not have that happen. So I was involved in security, and then my post-Coast Guard life, I worked for Department of Homeland Security for 4 years on critical infrastructure, and then I worked with Neptune LNG, which was, they were building an offshore natural gas pipeline connection about 16 miles off the coast of Gloucester. And, my job was Director of Operations to try and get it to commence operations, which we did. And then I was Director of Operations with a security company, Unarmed Security, and I had many accounts inside of 128, dotted along the eastern side of Massachusetts with a heavy connection in Brockton. And then I started as a veterans agent in the town of Hanson 5.5 years ago, coming up on 6 years now, and connected with Rockland. I was actually working part-time in both towns, and now I'm full-time in Rockland, and I'm happy to be here, and yeah, so that's a little bit about myself.
That's great. I didn't know about the family history with the military, but that's really impressive, so excellent. Could you talk now a little bit more about what a veterans agent does for a community? Because not everybody in town might know about that. So just generally what a veterans agent does.
Sure. So the main thing I do is really support veterans to apply for benefits that they are eligible for. So, I think there's two lanes. There's Veterans Affairs. It's applying for service-connected disability claims for veterans who may have been injured while in service, injured or exposed to, hazardous chemicals, or, like the Vietnam guys and gals, Agent Orange, and, there's radiation and stuff for the guys, nuclear testing. There's really a gamut of, so many things that the veterans are exposed to. And I help them file for service-connected disability claims through the VA. So that's one side. And then a separate side is supporting Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 115, Massachusetts Veteran Benefits, in helping veterans who financially, they're below a certain threshold, and they may be eligible, whether it's retirement or medically or financially, they may be eligible for veteran benefits through the state of Massachusetts. So I want to be clear, I work for the town of Rockland. People do get confused and think I work for the Veterans Affairs Department, and I do not. I just support, filing claims. In addition, I'll help education benefits, burial benefits. Really, there's a whole gamut of resources out there for veterans that they can apply for, and I do my best to learn each one and apply for them.
That's great. So since you brought up the Chapter 115 benefits, I think I'll skip ahead to that question to dig in a little further. So that, I think, is one of the biggest parts of your budget and one of the more important things that you do. I believe that the town appropriates funding, and so we upfront those costs, then we get reimbursement back from the state. Is that correct?
Correct.
Maybe you want to talk a little bit just about kind of how much money generally we're talking about per year and kind of the impact it has on families?
Sure. So the veteran benefits budget is, this year, is $290,000 for the town of Rockland. If I do my job properly and we file for benefits for veterans who are eligible and they meet those needs, the town will get reimbursed up to 75% of what the benefit is. So if somebody's making $1,000 a month in a veteran benefit, the town will be reimbursed $750 of that a year later. And I work with the treasurer's office to certify each month of the veteran benefits that we process.
That's great, thank you. Roughly how many veterans do we have here in Rockland? Do you know off the top of your head?
830 or so, and that's based on the last census. Really, the number fluctuates daily between veterans, dying, and then we have veterans that move into the community, and so they add to it. But in addition to the veterans, I'm here to support surviving spouses of veterans who have not remarried, and they may be eligible for veteran benefits as well. And it's one of the outreach things that surviving spouses just generally may not know. So when you add in surviving spouses, there's a few hundred more people out there that may be eligible for veteran benefits, whether it's the Chapter 115 through the state or Veterans Affairs benefits that they're also eligible for.
Gotcha. So does it matter if somebody served active duty versus National Guard or reserves? Does that factor all into whether you're able to provide any assistance or not?
Yes. So Massachusetts has a definition of veteran by law is somebody who serves on active duty. A reservist and a National Guard, National Guardsman or National Guardswoman, they do not necessarily meet the definition of veteran until they're called up to serve on active duty. Typically, they're called up under Title U.S. Code, Title 10, and Title 32 U.S. Code. And as an example, during COVID, just in the last few years, National Guardsmen were recalled to active duty by Governor Baker at the time under Title 32. And if they served 180 days of active duty being called up, then they meet the definition of a veteran. But it does limit, if they strictly are drilling as a reservist or a National Guardsman, the 1 weekend a month and the 2 weeks a year, they do not necessarily meet the definition of veteran, even though, they've signed on the dotted line, they're ready to serve, and ready to be called up, and they've made themselves available to that, but they're not necessarily eligible for veteran benefits. Unless they get injured while serving, and then there are other benefits that come later. So, being able to be buried at Bourne, Massachusetts National Cemetery, for example, a reservist who's retired with 20 years or more of service is eligible to be buried at Bourne, but if they've just served as a reservist, they're not necessarily eligible.
And just to be clear, all those kinds of definitions or rules, you don't make those rules up. Those are made by,
The law, Massachusetts
state
law.
law.
Yes.
gotcha. Are we, it seems to me like we're a pretty busy veterans community here compared to other neighboring towns. Is that really true? How do you feel we are as far as being busy compared to other communities?
So I would say, yes, Rockland is very busy. I think the population contacts the office, seeks out to have appointments and meetings and talk about their particular, claim or whatever questions they have, just questions if they're eligible for benefits. Very active. As I said earlier, I worked for the town of Hanson, and it's a different dynamic. Hanson's smaller, less populated than Rockland. However, Hanson still has like 575 veterans in Hanson. But there are subtle differences. So in Hanson, for example, there's an assisted living facility. So you end up doing a lot of VA pension cases for what's called aid and attendance, and you're very busy doing that with veterans or surviving spouses that are in assisted living facility care or nursing home care, where I do less of that in Rockland. However, in Rockland, I have many more veterans that are on Chapter 115 and seeking to file a claim or an appeal with the VA for their service-connected injuries.
Gotcha. So could you talk a little bit about the staffing in your office? And I'm going to laugh a little bit because it'll probably be a quick conversation because I do know the staffing, but for the community's sake, maybe talk about how you started and kind of where we're at now with staffing.
Sure. So when I started, I was working for two towns, Hanson and Rockland, so I was part-time in both towns. We had hired an assistant in Rockland to kind of cover Rockland full-time Monday through Friday. The assistant departed, resigned, so at that time I thought it was a good opportunity to just take on one town, and I transitioned to Rockland full-time. Hanson has since hired my counterpart in Hanson. I helped train him, and you and the town of Rockland were gracious enough to allow me to train him, or else I would have been doing that anyway. So, yeah. So as far as it's just me by myself right now. A couple of things. We are in the process of hiring a part-time veteran van driver, so the Veterans Office will grow in that sense, that there will be a veteran van driver 16 to 19 hours a week, coming in the next month or so. In addition, though, based on our population, we could easily grow, and I think we can support the work for an administrative assistant down the road. It would be something that we would have to budget for, and then space-wise would have to be updated.
Right. No, I think those are great points, and I do think we should talk about getting you some administrative support in future budgets for sure. So you just touched on two things that I want to talk about that are kind of spread out in my questions, but maybe I'll start with the transportation one, because you talked about the new part-time driver that we were able to add to the budget. I believe previously that was all done by volunteers and yourself. Maybe talk a little bit about the vehicle that you have, how you got it, and what kind of transportation services you provide, and how that'll work with a new person that we hopefully hire soon.
So Rockland has benefited from a very generous donation. And originally there was a 2014, a wheelchair accessible van that was, sized like a minivan almost, maybe slightly bigger. But that was, not doing well, had electrical problems and so forth. And then the person in the group that donated us the veterans van, the new one, they donated the new one as well, and they refurbished it. Stevens Foundation, I'm not sure if he truly wanted to be out there and known, but just wonderful man, wonderful organization, foundation that he set up to help veterans. And he doesn't even live in Rockland. He he lives in Hudson or Marlboro or something like that, and he donated to Rockland, the veteran van. So it was a very expensive van. It's a wheelchair accessible van. It's much larger than the last one. It's a 2020 Ford Transit. Can't remember the model, but it's a 2020 Ford. I've been, in the past, we had, veterans on the Veteran Tax Work-Off Program volunteering to do hours, and they would drive veterans to medical appointments. This van is a little bit more demanding physically. So what I've learned just from driving it myself, you have the lockdowns on the wheelchairs, and you have to understand the wheelchair ramp and the lift and so forth. But for the veterans, and I see a lot of this, that are not in wheelchairs, but they use a walker or something like that, to get into the van, the height of the van is very difficult. So I bought a step. There's hand, guards that they can grab, and I'm there to make sure they don't fall, that they can maintain their balance, and I can assist them into the seat, and then we get them to where they're going, their medical appointments. Primarily, the medical appointments are at the VA in Brockton, Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury. However, I'll also do other medical appointments if they have the need and it's not scheduled. We'll try and prioritize. But yeah, so right now, I've been driving it, which does take away from office time. And I'm very thankful that we're hiring a part-time person to do this. We'll have training through, the Brockton Area Transit System. They offer free training that we'll take advantage of. But this, when we get the part-time driver hired, it'll be very helpful on my schedule so they can focus on the administrative part of filing VA claims and so forth. That, when I am driving a veteran, I'm out of the office for 4 to 6 hours, bringing them to an appointment and trying to work remotely,
That's great. Yeah, I look forward to getting that part-time driver to help you particularly. You mentioned how your office is located in the senior center. Could you talk a little bit about that? Has it worked out well being in the senior center? Do people find it easy to get to your office? Maybe just talk a little bit about the site.
So for the older vets in town, that have not interacted with the office, they still think the office is at the town hall. So sometimes there are people walking around the town hall looking for the veterans office. But the senior center has been a great site for the office. I would say primarily the population that I'm serving are older veterans. So, the folks who visit the senior center, they actively see me there. There's ample parking for the most part, except when bingo is, on, and it gets a little tighter. But I'm also willing to go to a veteran's house or a surviving spouse's house to do paperwork. If they have limited mobility and they need me to go to their house, I go to their house and take everything I can with me. The space is, it's great for connecting with older veterans. There are some detractors that are difficult. It's the noise. There are certain days they'll have a band there or something like that, and I may be talking to a veteran who's trying to describe his or her experience in war, and they may be discussing PTSD matters, and it could be very difficult at times. So as far as space, it would be nice to have a quieter space, I think, a little bit more serene setting. But it's, infrequent, I guess, when those conflicts kind of occur. And I do my best to run around and ask people to quiet down a little bit while we're, dealing with a situation like that. And let people feel free to express themselves privately and not have people, listening to their conversations. And everything, by the way, I do want to stress, everything is confidential. People have provided me with medical records. It's HIPAA. It's only to be used to support their claim and not, we're not whispering about so-and-so and talking about themselves. It's a private space and it's honored.
No, that's important. And maybe just to state the obvious again, your office is located at the senior center, but you're available for all veterans, regardless of ages, for younger veterans as well. You're not only there for senior veterans. you're
No,
there for all
correct. The younger
veterans.
veterans, I think, now, when they transition out of service, I think they're getting better transition advice than the older veterans ever got when they were being discharged from the military. So they're going through and they're being discussed about job opportunities and they're being taught about, resume writing and stuff like that. The younger veterans are also very much in tune with computers. And, I mean, they could file a claim on their phone. Where the younger veterans tend to come to me is when they get the mailings from the VA. And on the VA, the first piece of paper may have 2 paragraphs that are very important to their specific claim, but they get 15 pages of writing. And they look at it and they go, what is this? So then they tend to call me at that time. But I'd be happy to be connected with more of the younger veterans and, seek me out just to have a connection. And as a side note to that, I am doing my best to copy the state of Massachusetts in record retention and the discharge form that all veterans get is the DD 214. So I'm trying to digitize. I scan, I set up a file so that every veteran I meet, I scan their file in. So if a family member calls for their DD 214 10 years down the road, it should be electronically available through our office. And it's already been tested because my computer fried, and I was super nervous that we just lost 1,000 DD 214s electronically, and we put the new computer in, and the cloud had it all there, and downloaded every DD 214. So the system has been tested.
That's great, and I've been to your office, and I know you are very organized, so that's excellent. So we talked a little bit about the building. I was hoping maybe you could talk just a little bit, if you want, about some of the interactions you have with other departments and the kind of cooperative efforts you might have with some of the other departments in town.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the senior center. So the director at the senior center is very accommodating, Julie Burke. She's awesome. And then, the staff there really, in whole, is great. I specifically work with Effie Lee, though, who is our outreach coordinator, and she helps, retirees and seniors file for mass health applications, fuel assistance. She deals with folks who may be homeless, but then they may not be a veteran or something. When she meets veterans, she connects with me and me likewise with her, to kind of tag team our efforts on how we can help somebody and best help their needs. She may help them on the medical side and applying for specific type of medical insurances and Medicare plans, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, that type of stuff, where I'll take care of the veterans, whether it's Chapter 115 or a VA compensation or pension type claim. So that's one. Then other than that, at Town Hall, I work closely with town accountants every week, town treasurer every week. They generate all the checks for the veterans who are receiving veteran benefits. There are specific circumstances that, sometimes I hand deliver certain checks. There's a deadline that we try to meet every week, so we stay on top of it, and we're very organized. On occasion, I deal with tax collector's office, not too frequently, thank God. And then assessor's office, I would say monthly, speak with the assessor's office. It used to be more frequent when there were veterans on tax work-off program. And then, but I work with the assessor's office or answer questions about property tax abatements and so forth. In addition, I work with your office and Sue, who's the executive assistant. With some frequency. There's always a question whether it comes up on cemeteries and with the history of the town that I don't know about that's before my time. She has a file on it somewhere and can help me out. Human resources, of course. I keep on going around the whole, I walk around the building and,
I guess the point is that you have a lot of interaction with other departments, and
yeah, absolutely.
It's a team effort, so.
I'll add, too, we have some veterans have some specific challenges, and we work with I forget the acronym, but it's Community Housing and Development. Am I saying it right? So Christine Sullivan and that staff that comes in, there's, folks who are applying, they may need a new furnace or something like that. So they're very helpful as well. And I haven't had to deal with them too frequently, another one, thankfully, but it definitely comes up in the wintertime a lot.
No, that's a really good point. Yep, we refer to them as community development, and they're part of our CDBG program. They manage it for the town. So that's a great example of cross-departmental cooperation. How about your budget? How big is your budget in total, roughly? Off the top of your head?
No, $290,000 for veteran benefits, and then everything else, then salary and all the other items are
Office supplies
fairly
and-
small.
Right.
So it's probably about $370,000 in total.
And again, the biggest part are the Chapter 115 benefits.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. And again, we obviously vote that budget every year as part of the general fund budget at town meeting.
Right.
You alluded to this a few minutes ago. Maybe you could just talk a little bit more about the types of tax exemptions or other types of, abatement programs that veterans can get, and sort of where you steer them when those questions come up.
Sure, yeah, the questions come up all the time. So a veteran who is service-connected, disabled, and receiving VA compensation rated anywhere from a 10% to a 90% rating for their service injuries, they're eligible for a $400 property tax abatement, and that's through the assessor's office. So they get an annual letter in June saying what their rating is, and then they take their DD 214 to the assessor's office, they apply for their property tax abatement, and the assessor's office takes care of it. Typically, the assessor's office breaks up that $400 abatement into the third and fourth quarter of every year, and they split it. So $200 are taken off in the third and fourth quarters. For a 100% service-connected veteran or surviving spouse of a 100% service-connected veteran, they receive $1,000 as a property tax abatement. There are special circumstances in which a veteran's death may be deemed service-connected, and if they're the 100%, and this also goes for the surviving spouse, they may be eligible for a full property tax abatement. So it's a very large benefit, and it's just one other benefit that the veterans are eligible for. So very easy to apply for, and but every now and then I get questions from veterans who do not have a service-connected injury, and they're not eligible for that property tax abatement. And of course, you have to own a home. Your name has to be on the home. You have to be domiciled in the home too. So if a veteran put a home into a trust, into a revocable trust to be, but they're still domiciled there, they would still be eligible for that veteran tax abatement, property tax abatement. If they put the home into an irrevocable trust or something, they would not be eligible. So that's, on the property tax side. There are other taxes, though, that veterans are eligible for. So, and there are all specific circumstances. People ask me all the time about the Registry of Motor Vehicles. They have specific excise tax exemptions, sales tax exemptions, but you have to meet specific criteria. And, something that comes up all the time are veterans who, they may be rated 100% service-connected in Massachusetts, but they're able to walk fine and so forth. Maybe, part of their compensation is for PTSD and so forth. So you have to be eligible for a disabled veteran plate. And basically, 60% of a veteran's compensation needs to be rated for lower half of body. That they have to be eligible to receive that disabled veteran plate, and if they are, then they'd be eligible for certain registry of motor vehicle tax exemptions, whether it's excise tax or sales tax for only one vehicle. So there's numerous, like, different benefits from different agencies out there. It's just, you know, do you hit all the boxes?
Gotcha, that's great. And obviously, that's so complicated, people can reach out to your office and you can help
Absolutely.
steer them in the right direction. That's good. I think you may have touched on this earlier, but could you talk a little bit about, do you get requests for, or do you, you know, accept donations of medical equipment or durable medical equipment? Does that ever come up?
So, yes, it comes up, and yes, I accept certain donations if we have the space for it. So, for example, I have a motorized wheelchair. It's one of those serious motorized wheelchair, not a scooter or anything like that. Probably weighs about 350 pounds. That's in my office right now, eligible. It was donated to me from a widow who, you know, her veteran husband passed away, and she didn't have need for it, but she wanted to make sure that it goes to a veteran. So we have found a home for it. It's been in my office for about 3 months. I get donations of air conditioners, you know, window units for the summertime. I get, and at the senior center too, we have wheelchairs, walkers, you know, I don't know what they're officially called, but kind of like they help in the bathroom, you know, like bathroom seating, adjustments, shower seating. So between the senior center and what I have, chances are we may be able to help somebody. In addition, though, but if somebody needs a special hospital bed or something like that, I'm not housing, you know, durable medical equipment to that extent, but I refer them to my network of, there's hospital equipment loan programs. There is a reuse medical equipment program, so I give the folks the phone number and have them call, and if those entities don't have what they need, their network will find it. And I do want to talk about ramps. I get a lot of requests for wheelchair ramps. You know, as an example, a veteran may have a stroke all of a sudden, just, you know, and then, you know, the next day or the day they get out of the hospital, they need a wheelchair ramp, and it's all new, and, you know, maybe, you know, the veteran's wife is scrambling at the last minute trying to accommodate the veteran. So I connect with, and I got to pass this group's name out, South Shore Veterans Assistance Organization. They are awesome. Nonprofit. I connect with them and say, hey, I got a veteran who lives at such an address, could use a ramp. They drive out that day or the next day, they look at it, see, you know, what they can do for measurements. Do they have a ramp in stock? And then they just text me back, and yeah, Tim, we can do it. And then I coordinate the ramp getting installed for free. So that is all free to the veteran. They do an incredible job. They have a golf tournament every year as their only fundraising source. I have to talk about them because they've really impacted the lives of so many Rockland veterans. They're a great resource in the community, but they cover the region as well, so I'm connected with them.
That's fantastic, and the more you talk, the more I can understand all the different connections and networks that you have to whether it's state or private resources that you help coordinate for people, so that's fantastic. You earlier mentioned the VA healthcare system. You want to talk maybe a little bit about, you know, why it is or is not important for a veteran to establish their own relationship with the VA, especially maybe for younger veterans?
Certainly. It is absolutely important. The times have changed, and the VA healthcare system is growing, and they're offering services that they never have offered in the past, and they're really building out those services. We're truly lucky in Massachusetts that we have multiple VA facilities, especially in the eastern half of Massachusetts, between Brockton, Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury. Up on the North Shore, they have Bedford. There's one out in Worcester and one out in the Springfield area. And so the VA, the reason to have the relationship, one, it builds a medical system that checking you, and whether it's just an annual checkup, those notes are going in the medical system, so should you ever have to file for a service-connected disability, the VA compensation side, which is not connected to the medical side, completely two separate entities. The compensation side connects to the medical side to get the medical records, and it will help your case. As you become an older veteran, and the older vet, they're now offering services of like home health aides. So if you establish a relationship with, let's say you're a primary liaison or you're a primary care provider at the VA hospital in Brockton. Could be a nurse practitioner, it's just you have to have that liaison. That person has to refer you to, the VA now has what you'll hear, community care, or the official office, I think, is a non-institutional care coordinator. And if you're eligible and you do not have to have service-connected disabilities, you may, but based on your medical needs and treatment that you need, if the doctor gives a referral to that staff is run by a nurse, or actually a bunch of nurses, and they coordinate with third-party companies like Old Colony Elder Services as an example, and they'll order, hey, this veteran needs 16 hours a week of home health aides. So that's all new. These veterans never had that before, and it's only growing. And I still am communicating about that all the time to the older vets. And I do want to dispel, the VA, I think, had, negative connotations about it. 15 to 20 years ago, people would complain about the services that they were receiving. And I feel the past presidential administrations, both parties, they have heard, and so the secretaries of Veterans Affairs over the past several years have built out this system and improved the services that they're providing to the veterans. In 6 years of doing this, honestly, less than a half a dozen complaints have I heard about, poor service. And I've had spouses comment of how happy that the service that their veteran is receiving at the VA. It's a behemoth, it's a big agency, but the people who I've met in the VA system are truly compassionate and they care, and they're growing their services. And I think those services are going to be very much needed to help keep veterans in their home as they age. And it's more than home health aides too. And there are differences as veterans get service compensated rated for their disabilities. They may, if they're rated at 70% or more, they may be eligible for some more services. But even those veterans who are non-service connected, they'll have some eligibility at some point in their life. So I think it's a value to be connected to the VA health system.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I think I have seen some articles talking about satisfaction surveys from veterans being much higher with the VA than non-veterans are with their private health insurance. So it's interesting to hear you say how it's really improved a lot over the decades.
It's interesting too, something else I learned, I didn't know this, but here in the Boston region, the doctors that serve at the VA hospitals, they're doctors that serve at Beth Israel, Brigham and Women's, Mass General, and those doctors feel like they're giving back to the veterans by providing services with the VA. So you're getting doctors that serve throughout the whole, Boston healthcare system. And they're pretty high-skilled, I would say.
That's great. So sticking with the kind of health-related issues, I've heard some information about the PACT Act, which I don't know too much about, and I've also seen information about the Camp Lejeune water contamination. So do you know much about that, and can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So the PACT Act passed Congress last August 10th, 2022, and it was a major package to support the veterans. I could be off, but I think it was like $400 billion that it was passed. And it expanded benefits, and what it did is it made, like Agent Orange, for example, there are presumptive diseases associated with the Agent Orange exposure. And Agent Orange was a dioxin, and it, hits a body and gives you cancer or, skin conditions, a litany of things. So the PACT Act expanded the presumptive diseases, added hypertension, I'm trying to remember them all, but, additional diseases that are connected to Agent Orange exposure. But they also added additional geography. It used to be that you had to be boots on the ground in Vietnam to be eligible for presumptive diseases associated with Agent Orange. No longer the case. About 4 years ago, they added the Blue Water, which was Navy, Coast Guard, and Marine Corps, who may not have been boots on the ground in Vietnam. They were on a ship inside of 12 nautical miles to Vietnam, and they have the same diseases that the boots on the ground guys were having. And, the winds prevail west to east, so they've expanded that. Well, the PACT Act added more geography, so it added Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Guam, and Rockland has veterans that I've helped that were not stationed in Vietnam. They were Air Force guys in Guam, and they swore Agent Orange was used at our base, and they used it to defoliate around the perimeter. So, as the veterans would, do their watch and follow the fence line and so forth, they're walking through what was Agent Orange was used on to defoliate the area. And they swore, for years I've been hearing this. Well, now they're included in the PACT Act. Some key components to the PACT Act. If a veteran has a presumptive disease and filed, say, 10 years ago for something that was not, maybe was not boots on the ground, maybe was in Guam at the time and was denied, that veteran has to appeal the denial. So I help do all that. If the veteran never filed, but has a presumptive disease and now under the law can file, we file a claim under the PACT Act. The surviving spouses, this is where it really can be huge for the surviving spouses. Let's say the veteran passed away in year 2000 of bladder cancer. Bladder cancer is a presumptive disease. If the veteran was in the Air Force in Guam at that, that base, that surviving spouse, if he or she did not remarry, they'll be eligible for veteran benefits. It's called Dependents Indemnity Compensation, DIC for short, and it's a compensation. And so the PACT Act opened all of that up. So surviving spouses can now file on behalf of their deceased veteran in their life. So that's what the PACT Act did. It's absolutely enormous. In addition, I think 31 VA medical centers are being built around the country with a good portion of that money. So, the VA is obviously growing throughout the United States. Camp Lejeune. So I don't deal with this too much. On the Camp Lejeune water contamination, it's obviously Marine Corps, and the water contamination has been identified from 1953 to 1987. So if you're in the Marines and you were stationed there and lived there for greater than 30 days or went to training there for greater than 30 days, and you have one of the presumptive diseases, that veteran can file a claim through the VA, and those are awful cancers, liver cancer, stuff like that. So what the Camp Lejeune Water Contamination Act did was really allow family members who had no recourse and employees who worked at Camp Lejeune to file. They're coming down with, they drank the same water. So the VA is there to support the veterans for service-connected disabilities. the Camp Lejeune Water Contamination Act opened it up so that family members who live there can file a lawsuit. And they file that lawsuit, and I can assist with this, but many law firms have been registered to file to file your name as part of the class action. It is going to be many years before it's adjudicated. They're going to have to get a few cases out of the way first to kind of set the precedent and go from there. So it is going to take, 7 to 10 years before these things are adjudicated. I have had people come to me, they're Marines who are stationed there, but they don't have a disease. Thank God. And they're questioning whether they should file or not. They can certainly put their name, if you're the veteran, I'm here to support veteran claims, but I don't do these, it's a lawsuit. So you're adding your name to that lawsuit through, you probably know all the companies around here that help support that. There's also, I do have a sheet to forward to the Judge Advocate's office in the Navy, which is really controlling all of this. But the family members is really who would be filing the lawsuits for. If a veteran died of, a Marine died of those presumptive diseases associated with Camp Lejeune water, the surviving spouse can file, to attempt to get DIC, as I said earlier, dependents indemnity compensation, and prove the case. But in addition, I think they could also file for the lawsuit as well.
It's a lot of information
Yes.
that you have right off the top of your head. I know you don't have notes on all this stuff in front of you. You were talking, a bit about, spouses of veterans, surviving spouses can come in and get information or potentially get benefits. Like, what's the most important document that veterans or their spouses should have when they come see you? What's the most important thing that you look for?
Yeah, and it's called the DD 214. If the veteran served in World War II, you may hear notice of separation. There's a different form number. It's not, the DD 214 started during the Korean War era, but it's the DD 214. So all veterans, surviving spouses, they all should have a DD 214 or attempt to get it if they don't. For the veterans who, nothing's going on in their world, they don't have to file a claim right now, I would make sure you get a copy of it, because in time, you will need it at some point in time. Surviving spouses as well, there's benefits called aid and attendance, right? So if somebody, if the surviving spouse is going to go into an assisted living facility, for example, they're going to need that DD 214 to file any type of claim. And this goes as well for Massachusetts veteran benefits. So burial benefits need the DD 214. I can't process anything without it. If you don't have it, I need at least a verification of service, and that would come from the National Archive, National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis. So Massachusetts has a great library of DD 214s, and for National Guard, it's called an NGB 22 form, National Guard Bureau -22 form. Likewise, very important document to National Guard. To process retirement points and stuff like that. I help guys file for their retirement. But really, that document is the end-all and be-all to do anything with veteran benefits that at some point in your life you will need.
All right, good to know. My last question is about parades. Memorial Day observances, Veterans Day, that type of thing. Could you talk a little bit about what happens annually with Veterans Day, Memorial Day? And then I guess the last part of that question gets to the Tri-Town Veterans Day Parade, which I think we're going to be hosting next November. So if you could
Yes.
talk a little bit about all those observances and especially the Tri-Town at the end.
Absolutely. There's probably more observances as well, amassed every now and then to, if we're going to do anything for 9/11 observance or a ceremony or something like that. And there are other pertinent days throughout the calendar. But the big ones are Memorial Day and Veterans Day. So here in Rockland, we have the Rockland Allied Veterans Council. And that's comprised of veterans and volunteers to be a part of that council that represent like the DAV, the American Legion, the VFW. A part of that council is also, we have Boy Scouts, because they help out with flagging the graves at all the cemeteries at Memorial Day. So that, the Rockland Allied Veterans Council, which is chaired by Jeff Najarian, really starts the process and coordinates. And the last couple of years, we've done observances and ceremonies for Memorial Day at the Veterans Memorial here right by the high school at the new Veterans Memorial. And this year we had really nice weather, although it was super windy. So learning lessons every year about, paperweights. But it was really nice. In the past, it's been a parade. And I think the group would entertain doing a parade again, but I got to put a shout out to all the veterans in town that we're really looking for energy and people to join, and maybe some different thoughts and different experiences to participate. And it's not a lot of time, but some of the guys and gals might want to pass the baton, and we want to kind of keep these these parades and ceremonies continuing, right? And it really helps with outreach, whether it's getting the word out to all the network and of people just to come to participate and see a parade. So that's Memorial Day. With Memorial Day, I just mentioned the Scouts. We flag all the graves. The Select Board was kind enough in Finance Committee, and they worked with me a couple of years ago. We got all these flag holders. They're markers that represent the different wars that the veterans served in. And if the veteran served during peacetime, I have a U.S. veteran holder. And it helps mark the grave, and then year after year, occasionally they get a branch lands on them, we change them out. But it really helps the Scouts identify which graves to flag. So we do that as well. I'll move on to Veterans Day. This year we are hosting the Tri-Town Parade. So with Whitman and Abington. Again, Rockland Allied Veterans Council and Jeff Najarian will kind of be the lead coordinator. I participate on that council, and I help pay for things that are in the budget for the parade and whatever we have to organize. And I do my part of checking off the boxes of what we have to coordinate. But this year we'll have the parade, so we'll start meeting. We typically meet I would say mid to late September, and it's like every other week. We do that until we get close to Veterans Day. And again, looking for help. Would love to have younger veterans involved as well, just to participate and really get the word out. I would love to have, if we have 830 veterans in town, I would love to have hundreds of veterans march in the parade if they're able to. And if they're not, we'll find transportation for them that will look cool.
It does look cool.
So, and that is held on Veterans Day itself. So no matter when November 11th hits, that's when we'll be doing the parade, the Tri-Town Parade.
Excellent, excellent. We've covered a lot. You've shared a lot of information. Is there anything else that you were hoping to communicate to the public that we didn't touch on that you'd want to mention, or do you think we hit everything?
Well, we hit a lot. There's always more. I I'm just thankful for the opportunity to talk with the town and you know, get the word out on all these things. And if I spoke too fast on any of these, for the folks viewing this, if you have any questions, please call my office. I do use the Town of Rockland website, Veteran Services. I'm doing my best to update it. That's another thing that I'm trying, as far as outreach and getting the word out on different things. I have different tabs for upcoming events, job opportunities, you know, whatever else comes into my mind, training opportunities, that type of stuff. And if there's a flyer that needs to be posted there that kind of, you know, represents the veterans in the town of Rockland, I'm willing to post it. And so I'll just, my office number is 781-616-6808. I hope I got that right. I have my card here somewhere, but, and my email is veterans@rockland-ma.gov. So it's veterans, that's plural, at rockland-ma.gov. So feel free to send me an email, and I do my best to answer the questions and go from there. And I do try to schedule appointments. Walk-ins are difficult. I could have, if somebody's in my office, the door is closed, and I'm trying to maintain privacy as much as possible. So please call for an appointment. I try to, you know, once I set you on the appointment, it's set. I don't schedule veteran van rides during that time. If I schedule a veteran's van ride, I'm out of the office for some hours as well. So, yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
That's great. Well, I think we'll wrap it up, and I guess I want to thank you for your service to the country, and thank you for everything you're doing for Rockland. We all appreciate it, and I know our veterans do, for sure. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.